I was right around your age.
I just asked.
When I was first diagnosed, there was not a whole lot of technology. And in fact, the whole concept of testing your blood sugar didn't exist. Not in terms of being able to test on a meaningful way at home and use that information. At the point where I was spent an entire week in the hospital, learning about your diabetes and learning how to deliver insulin. And then you went home with little test tubes, the latest and greatest technology 30 or 35 years ago when I was first diagnosed. The other big change is that there have been tremendous changes in how insulin is produced over the last 30 years. Pork insulin. So it was made, and there were a lot of problems with pork insulin because the human body's not used to being injected with proteins from a pig. So there were lots of people who had allergies to it, and lots of people who had bad reactions to that insulin, and they also only had one kind of insulin. You injected yourself once a day with long-acting insulin, and you hoped that that covered everything you ate and all the exercise and everything else that you did. And so the management of diabetes, even as recently as 30 years ago, is not very good.
Yeah.
Sure.
Do you take insulin on a daily basis?
Mm-hmm. So most diabetics who are insulin dependent will take insulin at least on a daily basis, at least once, as I was telling you a few years ago. Now, currently there are lots of different types of insulin. So you can take insulin that lasts 24 whole hours. It has a very slow, steady stream, and then you can take insulin that has a pretty quick onset. I currently take insulin continuously through an insulin pump. So there's a little catheter, and the catheter goes into a little cannula that sits inside just under the skin, and you change that every few days, and so it looks like a little computer. I'll show you guys what it looks like. So this is an insulin pump. It's just one of the many brands of insulin pumps that are out there. And if you hit the button, it'll tell you how many units are going in per hour. So currently I'm getting 0.55 units of immediate acting insulin. And then if I eat something, I can decide how many grams of carbohydrate are in that food. And I know how much insulin I need to take for that. And I can program the pump to give me that and hit the button, and it'll give me yeah, Ken.
Do you sleep with it on?
I do. I sleep with it on, and the catheters are really sticky, so if it falls off the bed, it doesn't come out. I can swim with it because the pump is waterproof. I can shower with it. I don't because the nice thing about these is that you also have the tubing goes to that little, and I'll show you guys. I think I have it. I think I can actually get to it. I can. The catheter is sitting right here, and I can clip it off right there, so that the little Teflon catheter that sits in my skin stays in, but the rest of it comes off. So I can go usually about an hour without it on. If I want to go to the beach and swim for a little bit and I don't feel comfortable taking the pump with me, I'll take it off. So in order for insulin to work properly, it has to be able to bind to a receptor at the cell to allow glucose to enter. And if the proteins aren't exactly perfect, it won't bind to that receptor properly. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I know you have friends who are also insulin dependent, and I know that sometimes you have to go down to the nurse's office with them for them to test their blood sugar. You probably go down to the nurse sometimes when their blood sugars are low. Has that ever happened? I know, Ken, you've probably walked John Paul down.
I walk with him like every day.
Yeah. So one of the things that can happen is you can take insulin, and you can take either too much, or you don't eat enough for the amount of insulin, or you exercise too much, and then your blood sugar, instead of being high, which is the real problem with diabetes, can get low. So if it gets below a certain level, then you don't feel well because you don't have enough glucose and enough energy to keep your body going. So that's one of the other challenges for diabetics, is to always try to maintain a blood sugar that's not too high, but also not too low. Because if you're taking insulin, there's always that risk. So I'm sure that you've had to take him down to get something, either some juice or something like that before. So that's one of the issues for diabetics. Most diabetics will try to carry something with them that will help bring their blood sugar back up in case it's too low.
Yeah, he keeps like these little juice boxes in his backpack.
Activity.
Particularly for kids, because they're going through a lot. One, most kids are very active. You never know when a child's going to want to eat their meal or not eat their meal. They're also going through, a lot of these kids are going through, at the same time that they're diagnosed, they're going through a lot of hormonal changes as they grow. So you're growing, your body's changing, and there are multiple hormones in the body other than insulin that will affect your blood sugar. So if you have a really big test the next day and you're nervous, you're going to release certain things that make your blood sugar go up. So you have to account for that. If you are feeling really stressed, if you are going to go out and play a really hard baseball game, some of those things can affect your blood sugar as well. So you have to take into account what you're eating, how much insulin you're taking, and what your activities are to try to keep a balance at all times. And I guess probably the most important thing is that you're keeping this balance for a reason. So one, you want to feel good day to day, and if you don't keep that balance, you're not going to feel good on a day-to-day basis. But more importantly, probably, is that if you're having blood sugars that are high all the time, and you're not controlling them, there are multiple different organ systems in your body that don't do well when there's too much sugar presented to them. Over many years, you can have many consequences to not keeping your blood sugar under control. So have you guys done any research yet on what sort of the down-the-road consequences for diabetics can be if they're not taking care of themselves?
No.
So I'll talk to you about a few different organ systems that can be affected if you don't control yourself. So whenever you look at any literature that talks about insulin-dependent diabetes, they'll talk about your eyes. Okay, so in particular, you can end up with something called retinopathy. They'll talk about your kidneys. So diabetics can have kidney disease if they don't take care of themselves.
Easy being here. What's that? Highs and lows of what? Blood sugar. Accurate reading, the most accurate reading you can get right now is still with the finger.
Yeah, although there are continuous glucose monitors that people wear that are sampling fluid from a catheter.
Right.
So you can wear two different pumps, essentially.
Might combine the testing for how much insulin you need, right? That blood test, it wouldn't use blood to test it, but that testing, and the insulin, like the pump that you have, the insulin delivery. So it would do two things. And the providing insulin, because some of you also talked about, wouldn't it be cool if you didn't have to get shots, take shots of insulin? So I